Success requires three things: energy, clarity, and focus. Those are three important ingredients. And the more you introduce complexity into your life, the less energy, clarity, and focus you have to deploy. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Catch the Zenith, the podcast where I talk about high performance and business. My name is Nicola. I currently work in software sales, and today I will explain why I believe that living a simple or boring life is the key to success. Now, let me explain. So, I think that most people copy the wrong habits. They look at people like Jeff Bezos or other famous people. And let's take Jeff Bezos for that example. They look at what habits they are doing today, like they are reading business books, taking long nature walks to think. In Jeff Bezos' case, he's investing in space travel. And they assume that's exactly how they got rich, that if they imitate the habits they are doing today, those folks, that they also become rich. But I think that's the mistake. And I think it was Chris Williamson or someone else who said on a similar note that the habits that made Jeff Bezos or other people successful aren't the ones he does now. They are the ones he did when nobody knew his name. And that's a crucial distinction. Because early, Bezos wasn't strolling through the woods with a journal under his arm. He was most likely packing boxes in a tiny Seattle garage. I think that's true, actually. And sleeping 4 hours a night and writing code for the original Amazon website. No deep work timer, no daily ice bath, cold plunges, just pure obsessive focus. And he also didn't go to 5 masterminds. He wasn't learning jiu-jitsu and Spanish on the side. He said no to almost everything, so he could say yes to one thing: building Amazon. And that's exactly what this episode is about. In other words, why living a simple, or in some people would call it even boring life, is the key to success in some domains at least. Or I think in most domains. So, one lesson I've learned repeatedly over the past few years is that if you want to achieve success of any kind, it's conducive to live a simple life. Now, why is that? Because success requires three things: energy, clarity, and focus. Those are three important ingredients. And the more you introduce complexity into your life, the less energy, clarity, and focus you have to deploy. And what exactly do I mean by complexity? By complexity, I mean engaging in multiple hobbies, learning various instruments, languages, sports, and consuming an excessive amount of podcasts, videos, and content creators. And of course, other things as well could be in that list, but just for the sake of this example, those are certain things that can add complexity to your life. And another example could be relationships can also add complexity, especially if you have a high maintenance spouse. In other words, a partner that drains energy, focus, and clarity. I think, just a quick side note here, I believe it's very important what kind of spouse you have next to you, who you marry basically, because the most time in your life you're going to spend with that person together. And if you have someone next to you who either is a cheerleader, who supports you in the pursuit of attaining your goals, or on the other side, a player who plays the game with you, that's exactly what we want, at least from my perspective. And what you don't want is someone who's holding you back and makes it harder for you to attain your goals. So you want either a cheerleader next to you who's making sure that you've got this, you can do this, who supports you with everything, or you have someone playing the game with you, for instance, in entrepreneurship. But if you have a spouse who consistently drains energy, focus, and clarity, it's way harder, obviously, to attain your goals. But if you have someone next to you who supports you on that journey, it's easier. And I think that's something also Sam Ovens, the founder of school.com, mentioned multiple times. If you want to go very big in entrepreneurship, you need a low maintenance partner. And that sounds a little bit cold or extreme, but I think that's a crucial part of it if someone has the ambition to build something very, very big. Or at least it can help if you go for that. Now, what can we do instead to reduce complexity and live a simple life? I see multiple points, which I also practice. The first one is it starts with your diet, or it can start with your diet. In my case, I try to eat the same thing every day, more or less. I've got 3 to 5 meals in my repertoire that I mainly eat, and it makes it very easy to me to hit my protein target, which I want to hit per day. And I don't need to ask myself what exactly I want to eat on a given day. A second thing is shopping or grocery shopping. I sometimes bulk buy essentials to avoid frequent errands. So I go once to the grocery store, I buy everything for 1 week, or if it's my wardrobe, I buy everything for a year, and then it's done. I don't need to think anymore about that. Another thing is the wardrobe I just mentioned. I've got a very minimalistic wardrobe. I mainly wear black, dark blue, and if I want to dress a little bit more elegant, like today, I have those light blue shirts, which I like. And it makes it very easy for me to dress up in the morning. I don't really need to think about it. And also when washing those clothes, it's pretty easy. Most things are dark and black. That's the exception. And they are all non-iron, by the way, those shirts which I'm wearing. So I don't need to iron them. They're already more or less okay wearing like this without ironing them. Another thing is gym. I mainly do one sport. In my case, it's hitting the gym 5 times per week. And occasionally I would go for a hike, but very rarely. That's pretty much it, what I do of sports. I work out in the gym. Maybe I go for a run, but it is very simple to me. I just do this. And also another thing is for instance, during my master's degree, I had a pretty small studio apartment, and I very much love that because it's small, it's easy, the maintenance is pretty simple to handle. And because you have fewer chores and cleaning efforts to maintain it are super, super simple. And now I just laid out different things I'm practicing in my life, and you may think that this approach is a bit of extreme, or is very extreme. But I would counter this with Sam Altman's quote, "Extreme people get extreme results." And a professor called Jeffrey Pfeffers, he said, "You can't be normal and expect abnormal returns or results." And I think it depends for what we are optimizing for. If we are optimizing for average results, yeah, it's totally okay doing what everybody else is doing. But if we are shooting for very lofty goals, very lofty targets, we need to think beyond that and think, okay, what can we do different? And normally, if everybody is going in one direction and you're going in the other direction, sometimes that can be a good indicator that you're doing something right. Not always, but it can be even as simple as simply by not being obese, working out consistently, eating a healthy diet, and sleeping 8 hours per night, you're already the exception. And you see, the bar has never been so low, as I think Chris Williamson used to say. And it's true. By simply doing the basics consistently, you're already an exception, and you lay fertile ground for exceptional results. And I think, building up on that, what I just said, extreme people get extreme results. To achieve the extraordinary, I also believe an unbalanced life or lifestyle is needed or required. Plus, being comfortable with boredom. And I saw many people like Panda Express founder Andrew Cheng. Maybe if you're not from the US, I'm also not from the US, by the way, but I lived there for 6 months. Panda Express is like a fast food chain. They're selling Asian food, I think China food, or Chinese food. And the founder family, what they did one thing for a very, very long time until they became so good that nobody could ignore them. they sold that Asian food for a very, very long time, and they become better and better, and they open more and more locations. And I think in the past 5-ish years, they have never opened so many locations in the US. It's really crazy. It's an interesting story, by the way. And it's almost inevitable, unless you're not that smart, to do one thing for a very long time and not become at least a bit better. It's like this example here with this podcast. I recorded with this episode 214 episodes. I'm still far from good, but I believe in becoming a little bit better after each episode. I do many, many different iterations, and maybe after 1,000 episodes, I have built up a reasonable audience, and some more people will listen to this podcast, and I become a little bit better. And I think I very much believe in consistency, iterations, and small improvements. And it's hard, and I know not a lot of people are willing to do that, but I think that's what distinguishes mediocre podcast from a very good podcast. Very good podcasts have done one thing very, very often, and there are some exceptions. Some people, they grow very, very fast. But for instance, Chris Williamson, he published, I don't know how many 100 episodes, and nobody was listening to him, or not a lot of people. And then he blew up, and he became consistently better, and he treated his pursuit like a professional. He went all in. I think at one point he made a decision to go pro, which meant that he's treating his podcast pursuits or efforts like a professional would approach it. Now, I just said doing one thing, if you do that, it's almost inevitable to become better. Important here, I'm not saying that if you do one thing and saying no to everything else and sacrifice a lot, that this is the happiest existence and you are feeling all great all the time. That's not what I'm saying. We are not optimizing here for happiness. I would make the argument we are more optimizing here for meaning in life and taking on responsibility. And how we achieve meaning in life is by taking on responsibility. But if you're optimizing for happiness, listen to another podcast or other podcast episodes. This is truly if you're optimizing for very big success, or at least that's what I observed from people who did that and achieved a certain level of success. Now, and a quick side note here, by the way, I also believe that most people, when they claim they want a happy life, they actually want a meaningful life, because nobody wants to be 24/7 all the time happy, since this is in many times a pretty impulsive state. Maybe another time I will talk a little bit more about that. But what we actually want is meaning. So what I'm saying is that extreme success requires abnormality. Most successful people are boring. They're not well-rounded. They don't have 10 hobbies. They just got really good at one thing by giving it all their time, energy, and attention. In other words, if you want to achieve a certain level of success, from my perspective, we should strip our personal lives down to the essentials, and energy, clarity, and focus are the fuel. Boring equals rich. And I'll give you an example to drive the point home. Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson became a successful boxer, a professional boxer, by training very hard, being super obsessed about the sport. But then he became rich. He was successful at boxing. And his life became more complex because he invited complexity by buying villas, mansions, cars, tigers, you name it. Or a lion, I don't know, whatever. And his life became more complex. And what does that practically mean? I think Sam Almonds talked about that back in his old days, YouTube days. That specifically means if you buy 10 cars, there is a lot of maintenance going along with that. Obviously, you can hire somebody, but again, you need to hire someone. And you start adding so many small complexities, and they start eating your focus, your energy, your clarity, and you don't want that. But if you have a pretty simple life, that could mean you have a simple apartment, you do simple stuff, you don't have 10 different hobbies, you don't learn, although it's pretty stimulating for the brain, and I also love doing that, every time a new language, every second week. just saying no to so many different things and yes to the major thing, it helps. Mike Tyson, he became successful by obsessing over one thing. Then he started to introduce complexities and things started to fall apart. And that's what we want to avoid here. All right, guys. I hope that helps. And thanks for tuning in. As a thank you for tuning in, I put together a list of the 100 plus most interesting podcast episodes I've ever listened to. You can click the link below, download it for free. You will get my best picks on health, wealth, and relationships, my top 10 all-time favorite podcast episodes, and I hope you like it. Thanks for tuning in. Bye, guys.